Welcome back, everyone. Next up, we have RetinalGeniX Technologies, Inc. It trades on the OTCQB under the symbol RTGN and is a medical device company focused on preventing blindness through a cost-effective mass retinal screening device and a patient real-time home monitoring, imaging, and physician alert system.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Dr. Jerry Katzman. I'm the Chairman, President, and CEO of a medtech company in Petaluma, California, known as RetinalGeniX Technologies. And I'm here today to give you a short recap of what we've been doing since we actually are in the OTCQB. It's very exciting. I'm going to just bring to your attention the salient points. We have a very short period of time to do this, but I'm going to make some introductions also during this meeting. And I just want everyone to be aware of the team that we have. So as a med tech company, as I said, we have three major initiatives. We had a primary initiative for home monitoring to prevent blindness for patients that are at risk for blindness. But that was our primary focus. But we've actually expanded that focus. And now the number one spot is something called DNA GPS pharmacogenetic mapping, which we started doing when we acquired DNA GPS. It's a software and patient app, and we're going to tell you a little bit about that as well. And then there's a third product that's in development, and that's for a cost-effective mass diabetic high-resolution screening software and device that will capture like a 200-degree field of view without dilating the pupil. And I'm not going to get too much into this, it's too technical, but I'm going to tell you we have an incredible suite that we're working on. But the most important thing is who's behind this? Who is everybody? Well, I don't talk about myself for a minute, but you could find out a lot. But our team is incredible, okay? And the newest member of our team that we're working is Dr. Larry Perich. He's actually a subject matter expert in pharmacogenetics, and I'll have a chance in a couple of seconds to let him say a little bit about himself, and then I'll take it from there. And of course, Dr. Vinay Mehindru, he's incredible as well. And he has a lot of focus in public health and cost containment, and he's involved in a lot of projects, but it's all relative to what we're trying to do for patients. And essentially, the project that they're working on is to take retinal imaging and associate it with pharmacogenetic mapping to basically used as predictors of disease. So you can, in a way, eliminate a lot of other technology that's very expensive, costing the healthcare fortune at the end of the day. And I think if things go right with this, I think we have the potential to make an impact on that. And so it's evolving, and we've only done this a couple of months now. We've gotten a lot of attention about this. So I do want to mention it before I even introduce them. In addition to that, the other projects were for home monitoring and retinal imaging for patients in screening. We have a world board, key opinion leaders that I have to tell you are second to none. And basically, you can take a look at the slide that I'm going to put up here very quickly and see who they are briefly. Of course, you see Dr. Perich, you see Dr. Mehindru, myself, and you have Dr. Herbert Gould, who's a luminary in the field of ophthalmology, is on the board. He put the first implant in the patient's eye in the world in China. He's probably, he's an anthology of history of ophthalmology. He's done some incredible things. He brought Fyodorov up. You all heard of him. He's the Russian at the time who was doing radial keratotomy in the United States. I'm not going to say more than that, but he is just incredible. Other people, just to mention, Marguerite McDonald, she's like an attaché to the Academy of Ophthalmology. And so she did the first refractive surgery, a laser, in the United States. Jack Doddick, over 20 some odd years, he was a Manhattan Ioneer, running it. He's probably trained hundreds and hundreds of residents in ophthalmology itself. He's an inventor. He's written books. But not only was he a Manhattan Ioneer, but he's also at NYU Langone, and hopefully he'll get to retire so it doesn't work anymore. And we try to get him to that point. We have one non-ophthalmologist, Ahmad Moudine. Ahmad Moudine was in charge of medical tourism at Harvard. He's a luminary in the field. He's been working in the diabetic space, but he's a cardiologist. He's not an ophthalmologist. And so as a result of that, his expertise working in cardiology and working in diabetes has been invaluable in the project of the last 10 years. He's been very involved in it. And last but not least, I just have to say, Lawrence Iannuzzi. Lawrence Iannuzzi, he's considered the world's leading retinal resolution image specialist, and he's written all of the major atlases in ophthalmology relative to retinal imaging. So you could read his resume, but he's been the founder of the Macular Foundation. He's an incredible addition to what we're doing. I just want to bring these things up. So we talked about who else we joined. I told you a minute ago, Dr. Mehindru. You can read it. It's fascinating, and he'll give you a blurb about himself, and you certainly will hear from Dr. Perich in a moment. I will say that since this collaboration occurred, it's been very exciting for me personally, for Dr. Mehindru and for Dr. Perich, and you'll see why in a minute. We have a lot of people who are behind this. We have, of course, being public, B. Riley Financial working with us. We have a company called ADM-tronics. They're a 50-year-old public company that builds basically med tech products. And they worked with people like Medtronics, et cetera. They're extremely well-known, highly competent, and have worked on scores of projects with the FDA successfully, I might add. We have accounting with Eisner Amper, SEC Accountants, Blank Rome. Blank Rome is a top firm, SEC firm out of New York and across the country. You would hear about them. But you'll notice here, USF Health. Dr. Perich will tell you a little about it because I'm going to ask him in a few seconds, and about Illumina. Those are affiliations that really at the time we're going to be talking about in a moment. So when you look at what we're trying to do, the first problem is the diagnosis of systemic disease. We'll talk about the pros and the cons. It is expensive, it's slow, it's hard to access, it's inaccurate. And so it's so expensive, and nobody wants to go get an MRI. No one wants to get a CT. No one wants to get forced to do echocardiograms unless you really need it. And if you could actually predict based on retinal findings and on pharmacogenetic findings, then you have something extremely unique. And we believe we do have something extremely unique. It's a great segue into introducing Dr. Perich. Dr. Perich is actually, he's doing surgery. He's at the medical school. I'll let him tell you a few things about himself. Dr. Perich, would you like to say a few words?
Yeah, Jerry, and I'm happy to talk to everyone about the involvement of DNA GPS with RetinalGeniX. What we've come to offer is that I've been in practice for since 1983. I've performed over 80,000 cataract surgeries, and we've had teaching many residents over the past 12 years. I'm the program director for HCA/USF with our program based out of Bayonet Point Hospital here in the Tampa Bay area. I have presently 6 residents with me, and we have the backing of the pharmacogenetics that we've done research on in publications, and basically outlining the patient's objective biomarkers to show whether or not they have risk factors for different types of diseases. And with this, we've also tried to involve using the apps to outline whether a patient has their diagnosis of their diseases and also their illnesses and their allergies that are possible involved in their lifestyles that are also lifted up into an app. With this app, we can integrate this to the retinal imaging to do an analysis of the patient's risk factors to see whether or not, following their fundus imaging with the cameras that are developed by Dr. Katz and the people at RetinalGeniX, that we can have a projective, objective biomarkers that analyze a patient's analysis of their progression of different types of diseases. Jerry, go ahead.
Yeah, so all I want to say about that, there's a tremendous amount of excitement about this. I noticed UCLA, I think it was, they just had gotten $10 million just to look into the concept of this because it could have such far-reaching effects. And it's that segment, I'll let you say something about that. And then I'm going to bring in Dr. Mehindru because he knows how important this is in public health, how important this is in dealing with the #1 issue with cardiovascular disease, macular issues and cancers. So Larry, you can answer a few things about how we feel it's a game changer.
Well, they find with the genetic component of ophthalmic disease, it includes studies to understand the patterns and the risk of inheritance and the accurate diagnosis and prognosis and the development of therapies to treat genetic abnormalities. At UCLA, they've been given, $10 million to enhance the further ocular genetics research, which is very similar to the work that we've done in the past. This type of data gives you the objective biomarkers that will give us a risk analysis. So therefore you can focus on which patients have which problems and how you can actually monitor those problems with the retinal imaging. And looking at the study of the changes in the blood vessels in the back of the retina and different analysis of the circulation, which can be seen to analyze whether a patient's progress with cardiovascular versus neurodegenerative diseases are concerned. So combining with the objective biomarkers of the DNA GPS, we can have better focus on which patients should be monitored closely for which type of health problems.
And that is great. I appreciate you saying a few words. I know it's a complicated subject and we have a lot to really talk about, but it's what the dimension that it's adding to RetinalGeniX. It's a game changer in the field, and most people are really caught by surprise. We know the eyes are the mirror to the soul, and the fact is that we're starting to work on looking to monetize it. And lastly, so people understand, we're developing an app that actually is going to be given away essentially for free. They'll be able to answer questions about their medicines, their lifestyle, their history, all these different things. But at the end of the day, they'll be able to have some of these biomarkers. We'll be able to test and profile and do something that is really hadn't been done before in relative to this. So I think that's.
Can we see the next slide, please, Doc?
Yes, I'm sorry. So in either case, I'll let Dr. Mehindru on the basis of that. You can see Illumina is one of the largest labs in the country. USF Health, they'll be involved in the studies that you're doing and the work that you're doing, and that makes the whole process exciting. Dr. Mehindru, I'll put you on for a second just to talk about the impact of this policy in public health and in the economics of that to medicine, not family practice, but certainly the insurance carriers. So you can say something about that.
Sure. Thank you, Dr. Katzman. It's an honor to be working with Dr. Katzman, Dr. Perich, and Dr. Gould. It's always hard to come after that. They're some of the icons in the space of ophthalmology. My background is primarily more population health management, financial performance management, and cost containment. I currently a CEO of a self-funded health plan called Exemplary Health, which is based on the same principles of cost containment and population health management. What gets me really excited about this is, if you follow the population health management, there are three most agreed upon pillars of success, which were put forth by Dr. Berwick in 2007 from the Institute of Healthcare Improvement. And those three pillars are reduce the per capita cost of the health per populations, improve the health outcomes of the populations, and improve the patient experience and quality of the healthcare. So if you look at RetinalGeniX, as Dr. Katz said earlier, you see the potential here to hit all those three pillars. It's gonna, if you look at the experience, which is the access, well, it's portable, it's lower cost, and you don't have to dilate the eye. I don't think anybody's ever gotten excited, oh, let me go get my eyes dilated. And it's not a very comfortable experience. And then you look at the outcome or the improve the health outcomes. Absolutely, you're hitting the disease, diagnosing it on a proactive level rather than treating the actual disease. And of course, when you look at the reduced per capita cost, if you treat the disease before actually it happens, whether diabetic retinopathy, you already know the cost containment. So that's why I get very excited about this. It hits all three pillars of the population health management and also the cost containment.
Thank you. I think I really appreciate that. This was a big shift for us to actually, when we went into this space, but it broadened out what we're doing and it made it even more dynamic. And I'm going to talk for the next few minutes about the other problems that exist that we're fixing with the actual retinal imaging itself, because we have a high resolution camera system that can be used at home. It could be used in nursing homes. It could be used almost anywhere. And as a result of that, we now can bring diagnoses through the doctors without patients even sometimes going to the hospital, leaving the nursing home, leaving the independent living facilities, or even the military. They're on their ships, and what are they going to do? So bringing really home monitoring, remote access, and we're not talking about telehealth here. We're talking about something different, and I'll explain what that is. So Vinay, I want to thank you very much for actually attending. I know you have a conference in Washington, and I didn't want to take up too much of your time here. But any questions that come in, we'll definitely refer in. And I think if in fact you don't leave by the time we finish, you'll be able to answer them yourself. So thank you with that. So in going up, and again, I'm being very mindful of the timing that we have here, picking the important points of where we're going effectively, and that was that UCLA gift we talked about with Dr. Perich for the moment. We have a real in-home retinal monitoring, imaging, and physician alert system. And again, we're building the prototype. The proof of concept is basically all done now. I mean, that which is great. And so there's things more that we have to do, but we don't need a 510K. And that is a game changer for what we're doing, because this is a whole different way of looking at something. And the patients, again, could be in their home. There could be studies being done by drug companies. There's so many things, and yet these patients wouldn't have to leave their home. And the data is in real time. And how it basically would work is Mrs. Jones would be at home. She wakes up at 2 o'clock in the morning, and she gets a pain in her eye. She doesn't know what it is or how it is. She sits at her desk in front of this device, and she looks in the device, but the device auto aligns, basically auto compensates her refraction, either because she put it in or because it does it itself. And then it takes images. There's no technician here doing this. And it does this to 35 to 40 some odd degree field of view. And it sends it to the doctor's office. And there's a nurse there at the doctor's office who will look at it and say, Mrs. Jones, you're having a problem. You need to go to the emergency room. I think you're having a glaucoma attack. Or Mrs. Jones, I think I'm not sure what you have, but I think I want the doctor to see it. The nurse in the doctor's office at 2 o'clock in the morning presses a button and sends the images to the doctor who's home. And the doctor looks in the device that he has in his bedroom, and he can see Mrs. Jones live. He can look in her eye live. He can move the image up, down, right, left, and he can make a decision whether the patient should go to the emergency room, whether there's any intervention, but most importantly, if he needs to be seen right away, he's going to say, Mrs. Jones, you need to be seen right away. I'll see you first thing in the morning. And that's a total game changer here, because you have to triage these patients to prevent blindness. Blindness is very much associated from the time that something happens and no one takes any action, people lose vision. I'd have people come in my office. I practiced close to 30 some odd years. Patients would come in the office and I'd say, Mr. Marcus, what happened to your eye? You lost vision in your right eye. And he'd say, oh, I tried to get in, and basically I could never get an appointment in to see anybody, not just me. But at the end of the day, the fact is you had a problem and you need to get that patient treated right away. Maybe they need surgery, maybe they don't, but they need to be seen. And the only way you can do that is if you have a way of triaging them, screening them, and to do it so that you don't have to, in most cases, you're not going to be doing any dilation in that case. But the point is, this is a very important aspect. And as we know, there's a lot of things going on in the retina that relate to various systemic diseases. That's what tied in with Dr. Perich and DNA GPS, because we know that based on the way certain retinal findings are, we can actually predict some cardiovascular markers. We can predict things towards Alzheimer's. We can make predictions towards MS. We can make this a whole slew of things that we can do. But you have to be in there to be able to do it. But in either case, this is, like I said, it's different than telehealth because we're not sending anyone to your house and we're not doing testing. What we're doing is we're observing and we're making decisions based on that. Well, anyway, again, we have a limited time. I just want to tell you, but in keeping with what we're doing, so we call it the retinal cam, that's the home monitoring device. In keeping with them, and just kind of looking at how this works, the next device that we're talking about has to do with actually screening patients with a 200-degree field of view and The reason we're doing that is because that's where the diabetic problems occur. And, you know, diabetes is 30 million people in the United States with diabetes. 23 million have been diagnosed. There's probably 7-8 million that are still walking around and have no clue. And we're interested in getting to the patients before they have the diabetes, to where we could screen and say these people are at risk. And that ties into DNA GPS even more, because why is diabetes going off the charts? It's because patients out there are basically exposed to all kinds of different things. And this is what we're talking, escalating blindness due to diabetic retinopathy and maculopathy. And this is a major problem in the United States. We don't even have enough people to handle this. And this device is going to be a non-dilating device, so it's easy to screen. People are able to do what they need to do. And just the point here, obesity is off the charts, literally. And that's, again, one of the reasons we're having this problem. People, they're exposed to all kinds of issues, mainly toxins. You can see that. And you know, our grounds are depleted, our airs are toxic. We have so many things going on contributing to this, and so we have to get on top of this, and that's what that's all about. I don't want to get into the financing landscape of this because, again, prices were crazy because of COVID, but I'm happy to say things have been moving nicely, and everything we're doing, all the projects we're doing are moving forward in a very nice way. But eventually, we're talking about not just ophthalmologists and optometrists, which there's about 250,000 ophthalmologists and 250,000 optometrists worldwide. But if you add primary care physicians, internal medicine, family care, etc., you have a tremendous number of physicians and allied health personals that can do this. At the end of the day, what's next? We're going to uplist, it looks like, to NASDAQ. We're working on that right now. We're looking for 10 million. Which will get all 3 products to commercialization, basically. And that's all I want to say. And I want to leave the rest for questions. I gave you a lot of information here to digest, but I thank you for your attention. I thank everyone on our team in doing what they're doing. You know, from my point of view, I want to thank you all for this. And I am available for questions. And, you know, again, if you have any specialty questions for Dr. Perich or for Dr. Mehindru, certainly we'll try to field them and get them. And I think we'll be good. So with that, I want to thank you so much. I think it leaves us enough time to do some questions and answers, and I want to thank you.
Thank you, gentlemen, doctors, really appreciate it. So the next 10 minutes or so will be available for questions and answers. That'll be moderated through the platform here. So thank you so much, and we'll see you soon.
Live.
All right. Thank you for that great presentation. Please welcome Dr. Mehindru, Dr. Katzman, and Dr. Perich. Welcome, gentlemen. How are you doing today?
Great. Thank you very much, Anna.
Thank you.
Good. We're going to start in with a question for Dr. Perich. Talk a little bit about what testing medium are you using? Tears, saliva, nasal? What are you doing in the lab?
In the lab, we're using mainly saliva to get our specimens, and the saliva is the foundation for the DNA GPS for our testing. We can test tears also for markers in addition.
And is this testing private? Talk about its confidentiality. Is it unidentifiable without a code?
Each patient has identifiable code, and it's private and it's confidential and it's secured, so that the patient information is not available except to the source of RetinalGeniX and the patient. So it's very secured.
And how does this testing prevent needless testing by insurers at these outrageous prices that we're so used to?
Well, Anna, what we do is through DNA GPS, we're able to focus better on the objective markers of which patient has more probability of a cardiovascular disease event, which we can then monitor through the retinal imaging, and also neurodegenerative diseases that are possible, Parkinson's, for example, and also many retinal diseases and diabetic retinopathy. So those things can be identified better, and it can also show the risk factors that a patient may have, so that they have to be given more attention to their problem as a patient is being monitored.
And Dr. Mehindru, talk a little bit about how insurers will want this data to eliminate this expensive testing that we're so used to.
Yeah, absolutely, Anna. Thank you.
So if you look at all the other diseases that we prevent by diagnostic testing, they're all paid for, because once you have an inexpensive testing available, which also is has a high sensitivity and specificity of predicting the disease in the right patient, that becomes essentially the standard of care. If you think about it, the common ones, having a stress test done for the heart disease is considered pretty much normal and is paid for. We all know about the colonoscopies, generally starting at age 50. Screening colonoscopy for preventing colon cancer is essentially the standard for most part. And in certain patients, CT scan of the lung to predict lung cancer. This not for all patients, but certain types of patients, like Dr. Perich said, when you have a high probability, once you have that test, which is cost-effective, easier to use, of course, that becomes the standard, and everybody wants to have that test versus anything else, which is not easy to use, is less sensitive and more expensive.
And talk a little bit about how public health, managed care, and Medicare and other organizations like that, they must be eating up this technology. How have they been responding to this?
So this one, there's a lot of talk about the, as we call the ocular genetics. There's a lot of research money grant going into it. Relatively new field as of some of the predicting new diseases that we'll be talking about. There's been some part, as was in the talk, as Dr. Katzman talked about, is available, or has been available, like hypertension you could see in the retina. That has been there for several decades. But as far as insurance, whether it's managed care, commercial payers, or government payers, Medicare, Medicaid, they would all want to have this type of data, both for preventing the disease and in some cases early treatment of the disease, because you catch it very early, and it is inexpensive, or less expensive, I should say, compared to the other modalities available.
And last question, just due to time probably, talk about how you see the pharmacogenetic mapping expanding the home monitoring retinal imaging and diagnostic footprint.
I'll have Dr. Perich take that one.
Okay.
Hey, through the pharmacogenetics, we can get a better probability of the patient's likely course to have a disease progress to some point that needs to have attention focused by the clinician. So by the pharmacogenetic mapping, we can predict more which candidates are going to be more likely to be monitored closely. Plus, the longer we do these studies, we also come up with more SNPs, which give you more identifiable factors as to the patient's probability of that disease.
Well, gentlemen, this is fascinating, life-saving technology. Thank you for this. Do you want to have any quick closing remarks?
I couldn't be more excited. We have really expanded RetinalGeniX to another level, and I think this has the possibilities of setting up new standards of care. And we're contacted every single day about this more and more. So I couldn't be any more excited about it.
Great
team.
Thank you so much for joining us. Please come back again in the future. We would love to hear from you again.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Gentlemen. Okay, everyone, stay with us. We'll be right back with our next presenter.